Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Today I have a little travel vlog showing you some of the supplies that I took with me on a recent road trip and how I used them. First up, I have some fine liners for social media and personal trackers, as well as this folio that has 4 books inside. One is a sketchbook for random patterns and testing out new things. This is my social media stats book, which is where I just keep track of how often I post, and just have color coordinated guide for what platforms I'm posting on. And this has a lot of empty space in the back, so I do plan to use this next year as well. And then I have a travel planner, which is new. This is not normally in this folio. This just has some things that we're going to do, places to go, things like that. And then this is a book with watercolor paper in it that I brought with for painting, and I actually didn't end up using that at all. I also brought some jelly roll pens and fine tip Sharpies, and these are really great for adding some little details and textures. And then in my Sula pouch I also brought some zebra mild liners with colors that I was using to create things for Patreon, some Sakura microns, which I like to use as an overlay on my nature and landscape sketches, and then I also have these brush Faber-Castell artist pens, which are usually the base for those landscape sketches. I also brought a spray bottle, eraser, washi tape, and some clips, and then those tins at the bottom were my paint tins, but I actually didn't really paint at all this trip and I didn't need to bring those with. Starting out, I just decided to sketch some of these clover that I had seen on a walk with our dog, and really kept them very loose and simple. I just sketched in the base colors and then used the microns over top to add more texture and details. And again, I tried to keep it simple and loose and not try to include too many details, and really just have fun making different shapes and textures. If you have seen some of my other videos, you might recognize that I was recording in a different way for this one. So normally I have a tripod set up over top of the table or desk that I am working on, and my camera or my phone, whatever I'm recording with, is just looking straight down onto my paper or my canvas. For this, since we were traveling, I didn't want to bring a bunch of things with, so I did not bring my tripod, and I just was recording everything handheld, which makes it a little bit shaky at times, so sorry about that, and I will try to figure out something better to do the next time that I'm recording while I'm traveling. Maybe I'll bring a little tiny tripod or something. The problem is I just don't know how to get it elevated above the page if I do use a little tripod, because I have a tripod that's only a couple inches tall, basically just enough to hold the camera up and be able to angle it a little bit. But I will try to figure something out differently for our next trip. I don't know when that trip is going to be, but that's the reason that this is a little bit shaky and a little bit different than usual. Anyway, this was one of my first sketches, and I think it turned out really cute, and it might actually be one of my favorites from this group of sketches. Up next is another drawing in a similar style. This is an inspiration picture that I had my husband take while we were driving. This was actually a double rainbow, but you can only see one half of it in this picture. But as we were driving through, I believe, Nebraska, we drove through quite a few thunderstorms, and then on the other side, the east side of the thunderstorms, there was this really beautiful rainbow, and as we were driving along, it kind of followed us for a while, so we got to see rainbows for probably like 45 minutes or an hour, which was a lot of fun. But this is the inspiration for that, so I'm just making very loose, distant trees, and they're really just kind of scribbles, and then I'm adding in a little bit of texture for the grass and the foreground, and I did not want to include all the buildings, so I just did a rough sketch of the field, which really you can't tell what it is, it's just kind of some texture in the foreground because I didn't want to add a lot of details and I wanted to more focus on the trees and the rainbow. And after I did those base colors, I just came in with my microns. With my microns, I do have a darker and a lighter color of most of the colors that I have. So the green and the blue especially I do, and then I have pink and purple. I have a brown, obviously I have several black, and then I have a reddish kind of brick color. Because I have those colors, I used a darker green for outlining the trees that are closer, and then the lighter green for adding some texture and outlines to the trees that are farther away. With my Faber-Castell brush pens, I don't really have any colors that would be good rainbow colors, I didn't feel like, so I ended up using the mild liners that I had brought with, and I kept it kind of simple and only did a few colors. And the idea was there, but I don't really like the way that it turned out, so at this point I was like, oh wow, these colors are really not working good, so I tried to use the lighter blue to kind of blend the mild liner out a little bit, but it didn't work very good, so I ended up just using that to fill in the entire sky, which I probably would have done anyway. And then in a moment you'll see that I used the water brush from my paint set to blend the mild liners out a little bit, because they do smudge with water since they're water-based. So that did help a little bit, but if I was making this again, I would not use the mild liners, and I would probably just use watercolor to make the entire rainbow instead of trying to blend out the mild liners. It didn't turn out horrible, and I think it's okay. I like it well enough, but I definitely would have just used watercolor instead, and I think that result was a lot better and a lot more of what I was hoping for with the more pastel and lightly blended kind of look, instead of it being super noticeable each stripe of color. After I did this little test of how I would paint it if I was using my watercolors, I switched over to another reference picture, which was from also Nebraska, I think, actually, and that was just this cool rock formation that I thought was interesting and had some interesting textures. But again, I didn't have quite the right color. I don't have a light tan in these markers, and I didn't bring my Tombos with, so I used gray first, and then I used brown and green to add in the trees, the shadows, some texture, all of those things. And obviously it would probably turn out better if I had my light tan, like sand colored Tombow, because I could have used that for the base. But it was fun to try to work with just the colors that I had and see how those turned out, and just use those as kind of like a challenge to see how well I could make it match the picture even though I didn't have the right colors. I decided to use a little bit of this brownish gold watercolor to try to blend out the colors a little bit and soften them a bit, and I probably should have started using that as the base before I used the markers, but I didn't think of that before I started, and that probably would have made it be a little bit better of a color, but blending it this way helped a little bit, although it did make it overall a little bit darker. After that, I just went in and added in the sky, and I don't usually try to keep my brush strokes all facing one direction. I am using this set, I guess you could say. I usually use these Faber-Castell Pitt pens alongside my microns, so when I'm using that combination, I don't usually try to keep my brush strokes facing one direction. So that's why you'll see in the sky, I intentionally made it kind of sketchy look and had them go different directions, just because I like the texture that it adds. And then I used my brown micron mostly to add in the rock texture, and again, keeping things very loose and sketchy and scribbly. That's the style I prefer for my travel sketches, just because it takes away a lot of the pressure of trying to make a perfect recreation of whatever it is that I'm seeing or using the picture from. And that really just makes it a lot more fun. Instead of trying to make a perfect copy of rocks, unless you're going to take a really long time, you can't really quickly make a sketch that actually matches the natural shapes that some of these rock formations are. And then just adding some texture for the trees and bushes and plants and all of that sort of thing that you could see a little bit growing up the side of this rock formation. It did seem to be mostly trees, but again, I'm not adding very much detail, so I just kind of scribbled in some colors. Up next is another plant that I really like the look of. I believe this is a staghorn sumac. These are all over in the area of Indiana that we used to live, which is northern central Indiana, pretty close to the Michigan line. And I just love how fluffy they are, and they're so fuzzy and cute. It looks like a giant clump of little fluffs that are all stuck together. I know that's a very official description, but it is a lot of fun to draw them as well, because they're just kind of a shapeless poof that's kind of a cone shape, so you don't have to get too into the details and you can just make a lot of little fluffs. And as long as you get the general shape down, I think the idea of what it is that you're drawing translates pretty well, even if you're not adding a lot of detail. So I started with the yellow dots that are at the center, and then I used pink and then dark red because they kind of change colors a little bit as you go out from the center. They do have a few different colors. And then I just added some leaves. These are not exactly how their leaves look, but again, I wanted to keep things loose and more sketchy for all of these, so I just kind of had fun with creating leaves, going different directions, and tried to fill up some of the space on the page. And then I also made some darker leaves in the background and some sticks, which I did that off camera. And then I came in with my microns again and added the textures and layers over top to make more of the fluff and to define some of the different shapes a little bit more. I usually end up bringing supplies along and then not using them, which did happen again, but I wanted to try to use some of these gel pens and add a little bit of sparkle and texture onto this part of the drawing. I'm not sure that it worked that good, partially because with the elevation changes, the pressure change kind of messed up how the ink was flowing out of my gel pens, which is a common problem I have with gel pens. Even if I'm not changing elevations, sometimes I still have this problem. So the pink didn't come out as good as I hoped. I added some random texture in the background using the gold. There wasn't really a plan behind that. I just kind of was scribbling a little bit to add some shimmer. I did the same thing on the leaves, and then I came back with the brown micron to add some more shadows and textures on the sticks as well. For the sky, I probably could have used either of my Faber-Castell blues. I have 2 or 3 shades, I believe. I think it's 2. I wanted some brighter colors, so I decided to use my mild liner highlighter again. That also helped tie in the really bright colors that I used in that second drawing over on the top right, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. I didn't want that to be the only place that I used the mild liners, but I also didn't want to use that bright of a green for the leaves, so I figured the sky was a good place to do that. The last thing that I drew in here is some fireworks, which I did not record, but I did have some videos of the fireworks that were the inspiration that I wanted to include, so here's a flash and noise warning for those firework videos. The audio fades in and out a couple times because I didn't want any copyrighted music to play for too long, so sorry about the weird fading in and out and volume changes. That was just kind of the easiest way to include a little bit of the sound without having too long of a section in here. Again, I didn't record the process, but I did include pictures as well as the overview of the whole sketchbook page. But that is all for this video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this little look at kind of what I do for travel sketching, and I will see you guys next time.